So this is what many of us would call the SVG panel. This is what we do year-round. We talk about sports production. We have some of the top heavyweights in the industry, if you want to say that. And this panel is going to be specifically about everything besides the game itself, which I'm sure everyone here watches sports television all the time. And the game is really just a small part of what is now, for the Super Bowl, a, 12-hour TV window on Super Bowl Sunday or something like that? Right? So we're going to start off. I'm going to have each of these gentlemen introduce themselves. They are each part of some of the largest productions that are around in the business today. We're talking about the NBA All-Star Game, MLB NBA playoffs, Final Four, the Super Bowl, and NFL Draft, and other massive NFL events. The FIFA Women's World Cup, which I think most of us can agree was the kind of, not high point, but it definitely in terms of social media talk and everything, the biggest thing last year. And then the CrossFit Games, which if anyone's not familiar with the CrossFit Games, my favorite stat that was reiterated to me yesterday was for the CrossFit Games finale, they use the Monday Night Football truck, EN1, and they max that truck out further than Monday Night Football, which is quintessentially the biggest show around. Don't tell NBC I said that. But besides, but one of the biggest shows around. So, Tom, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit, reintroduce yourself. By the way, Tom is kindly filling in for Leon Schweier from Pac-12, who's in your programs. He was unable to make it. Tom, tell us a little bit about NBA All-Star and maybe NBA opening night and how you try to build that epic ambiance and feel around the game itself.
Okay, right, and the studio shows really are about entertainment. So, we do broadcast the game, but when we get to the studio shows, it is all about the entertainment value. We're fortunate we have Charles Barkley, who's with our NBA property, very noteworthy, newsworthy person. So we build a show around that. And that's really what people want to see, right? That's what keeps them entertained, and how do you create that experience around that? So the studio shows that we create are really focused at maximizing that exposure, putting him in an environment that really allows him and the rest of the team, with Shaquille O'Neal, Kenny Smith, and Ernie Johnson as our host, really allows them to explore whatever comes to mind, whether it's something about the game or something entirely different. That's what we try to do with those events. With the NBA All-Star, obviously it's a made-for-television event with all of the, big and famous NBA stars there. So it provides a lot of opportunity to really let those stars shine and let them talk about the stars, whether they're performing well or not, how they'll do in the All-Star event. When we get around to the postseason, both for basketball and for baseball, it enables them to show off their knowledge. So, with Ron Darling on our MLB postseason and Cal Ripken, two Hall of Famers, it really gives them the chance to talk about what it's like to be a player in the league and what it is to participate in what for many of those players is the highlight of their career, being in the postseason. So that's the environment that we really try to create for the talent, is to give them a platform where they can really talk about the emotions, the experience, how it's changed their life or how it's changed their approach to the game, and how we as viewers get just a tiny glimpse of what it's like to be, to play in the game, to participate, or to be an athlete. And that's what we focus on, and that's what all of our production teams try to do every day.
And you guys just did a pretty cool thing out in San Francisco for NBA opening night as well. Pier 19, I don't remember what number.
Pier 39.
Right.
Well, actually, Pier 43 is if you specifically where the concert took place. So for the NBA opening night, on the first night of the NBA season, we typically have a game from the previous year's champions, which were the Golden State Warriors. Golden State Warriors are in Oakland. So there really isn't much to see in Oakland. So we
I don't see that many people offended out there. I thought they might get a gasp or something.
No, the people from Oakland, no.
Right.
So we hosted the opening night studio festivities from Fisherman's Wharf, and part of that was a concert. So that is now becoming a much bigger part of what these events are. It's not just a studio show and a TV show on site. Now it's a full experience for people that are there at the event as well. So it's not you're just seeing four guys up on a platform. There's entertainment, there are booths, there are exhibits, there's all kinds of other activities for the people. So it's really an event. And that's what we're trying to do now is create each of these programs and each of these activations as events. So it's not only the television audience that can participate, it's also the people who come to watch, have something to do, have somewhere that our sponsors can connect with them and provide them opportunities to participate in basketball or sports related as well as enjoy a concert.
Very cool. And we'll dig into a little bit of that deeper. Speaking of big events and making it feel like that, Mike, tell me what a week in the life of Super Bowl is like for NFL Network. I mean, it's a city-wide event, no matter where it happens to be. 2 years ago, a bigger city than most. This year in Glendale and Phoenix. What's it like? And take me through a little bit of your operations for a Super Bowl week.
Sure, and as Tom has mentioned, so much of it is about entertainment. And on top of that, with most, if not all the events we do, especially Super Bowl week, about access. We really try to make about access. So we made a very conscious decision in advance of the most recent New Orleans Super Bowl, in advance of New York. And again, we're applying a lot of lessons that we had in New York to San Francisco, which is also just between San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland, making it a Bay Area Super Bowl, if you will. Making it maybe less about one or two fixed locations and trying to have a little bit more mobility and flexibility and really trying to cover as much of the city or cities or areas that we can. So the week of Super Bowl, again, obviously the amount of planning that goes into it is no different than the planning for all these major events. The mantra that we've taken is everything but the game. So we're trying to, over the years, and the first one we covered was the first year that the NFL Network was in existence, was in Houston. To give a little bit of scope, we were doing 2 hours of live television a day for the week leading up to now we're averaging, I believe, 12 hours a day live leading up to the game. And then I think the pregame itself, I think we've actually tried to have hours added to the day to do more pregame shows. But we haven't gotten a word back on that yet. But it's, we really try to do everything but the game. And how we're trying to accomplish that is a combination of multiple production sites at different locations, stadium, a fixed one at the Embarcadero, and then obviously we're still also running some cameras home to Culver City where our main hub of operations are. So it's really become being there from launch until now, 15 years later, to watch it go from, doing a 2-hour show out of a little bread box in Houston to now just multiple live trucks. And then, then there's also what we're doing on game day with I believe, 8-hour pregame show, and then a 2 to 3 hour postgame show based on just how things time out. But it's just it's become this massive undertaking that, as we've realized, especially after New York, and again going through Arizona to get to San Francisco, that it really becomes a small Olympic type unit in terms of planning and preparation, and how we've tried to approach each year over year, especially New York to San Francisco, the challenges that those metropolitan areas convey, where you don't necessarily have this congregation of people immediately gathering, and you still want to have, there's going to be concerts involved throughout the week. How do we cover those, but also still balance entertainment with football, with X's and O's and guests, and that whole undertaking? So it's been quite a process to see develop.
Right. And you mentioned Olympics. I mean, David, you know a thing or two about producing Olympics, and I'm sure have brought that to what was just a massive production in Vancouver this year, and just that set. We're talking a multi-level, huge footprint set with cutting-edge technology, and that following up on what you guys did in Times Square the year earlier. How do you guys go about thinking up these sets and designing these sets, and what are the requirements that go into it? And just give us a little bit of an overview of what you guys did at the World Cup there.
Part of it is you want to be true to the area where you are. You want to be authentic and feel organic. So the spot that we had in Vancouver was magnificent, overlooking Cole Harbor. And Gary Hartley, our brilliant creative director, and Jeff Hall, our scenic designer, from the moment they first saw that space, it was really interesting because I was there with them when they went up for the first time, and you could almost hear the wheels turning in their heads. And what they really wanted to achieve was to create a structure that was in harmony with the space, that reflected the architecture of the Northwest. It also incorporated some of the indigenous First Nations sort of artwork and symbolism and things. And I think one of the greatest compliments that we all got for it was we had numerous people say that they thought the structure we used for our stage was a pre-existing structure. It didn't look to them like a TV stage that had been built, and that honestly, that's the highest compliment you can give us. That was certainly one of our goals.
Right, but it was in fact built, and by no small amount of effort. Right?
Yeah, the really amazing thing is it got built in 15 days, and that benefited in no small part to a phenomenon that we enjoyed the entire 40-plus days that we were there. We had 1 day of rain, which now they tell us that June is the least precipitous month of all up there in the Great Northwest, but you still would have expected more than 1 day of rain.
Right.
And the 1 day of rain we got was on an off day. We weren't on the air, so we got lucky. There was a side of me that was afraid, even though I knew it had this wonderful facade that appeared to be stonework and all that. We knew it really wasn't. And I had these visions of if we ever had a typical sort of Vancouver, Seattle, Portland kind of downpour, that the whole thing might have melted.
All comes tumbling
exactly,
down.
but happily we didn't have to experience that. And then the really melancholy thing, and for those of us in this business, we all have had an experience probably similar to this. 10 days after the final, so after the U.S. women won their third championship on July 5th, 10 days later, it was all gone. We had a picture from Kevin Callahan, our director of operations, sent it back to us who were back in L.A. It was shocking and kind of sad to see it was gone without a trace.
Right. We were checking in. They had a live cam, and we were kind of checking in every day to see as the set got built. And if you have time, check out online. I think the time-lapse video, I'm sure, is somewhere still there. It's very cool just to see this gargantuan structure built in like you said, 2 weeks, essentially. So. Joe, I mean, the CrossFit Games are one of the more unique properties around when it comes to sports or beyond sports, however you want to call it. Just to kind of give everybody an insight, talk a little bit about the main event that you guys produce, which is an epic grand production, and how much that contrasts with the way that you guys produce competition throughout the rest of the season, and how you do what we're talking about here, build content well beyond the actual competition itself that's happening.
Well, it's very interesting sitting up here with these heavyweights who week in and week out produce such excellent content. For us at the CrossFit Games, we start out our season by doing studio programming at our small studio at CrossFit HQ in Northern California. Now, we use maybe a half dozen people to produce that, and we produce some very interesting content. But when we get to Carson, California in July, we scale up to about 275 to give you kind of an idea of the difference in the scale and what we're dealing with. A lot of our programming that we do ahead of time is looking ahead at how we're going to build up towards the games. We have basically two qualifying rounds, and we build as we go. The productions get larger and larger as we get closer and closer to the games, but the games is a quantum leap for us. So we put a lot of firepower in there, and it's basically scaled so that we can do multiple things, because we not only cover the event, but we run the event as well. So we have 5 control rooms that are usually going, at least 4 of them going at the same time. We do shoulder programming around the competitions, where we supply analysis, replays, highlights, a look around the venue to give people more of a feel for what it's like to be at the games. There is a very, very enthusiastic CrossFit community, and it's a global community too. So it's not just folks in the United States. We want to give the CrossFit fans around the world the opportunity to feel what it's like to be at the CrossFit Games. So a lot of our shoulder programming that we do around the competitions themselves give people kind of a peek into all those things that are going on the StubHub Center campus while the competition is going on. And then, of course, we supply a lot of that to the jumbotrons and screens around the campus, because we want to give information to the spectators and fans, give them a higher level of understanding of what's going on. Our fans really like the details on the sport, and so we like to deliver that to them. And then, of course, we've got simultaneous programming that's going on for both ESPN, the main networks, and ESPN3 on the digital level as well.
And I definitely want to talk about how digital plays into all this and how you can kind of use a lot of this programming that you generate for the linear telecast for digital and social and that kind of thing. But first, Tom brought up something that I wanted to make sure to address, because it was my first question. And that's, of course, you guys would love to have unlimited budgets for sets and things like this. But when it comes down to it, I think, there's the game, and obviously that's going to have priority for the suits at the top all the way down to, the production team on site. But how do you go about trying to get the best, bang for your buck, the most that you possibly can out of what you're given to create what kind of needs to be a, top of the line, as big as it gets type studio set experience on site? And Tom, since you kind of seemed interested in this, what do you do to make sure that it's the best it can be on the budget you've been presented?
Well, we start by teaming up with an events group. We have an events group within Turner that works with our sponsors. And many times sponsors are looking for customized events where they can highlight if they have, let's say, a new phone that they're introducing, or they have a new product that they want to make a big deal out of. So we work with the sponsorship group to come up with a plan, a strategy of how to create this experience. So it's an activation for a sponsor, but we have to get a hook to get people in, right? So maybe we add some music, we have our studio show. When you put all of these pieces together, you put these 3 pieces together, and now you've created this experience. So it's not just a TV show, it's not just a concert, it's not just an activation, it's something that someone can go to and spend some time there and get to experience quite a bit. So it really creates this buzz of being an event, and that's how we've been able to leverage these different initiatives, pool the budgets together to make things bigger as a whole than we could have ever done individually. So that's how we've managed the budget side of things. It, it you never have enough money.
Right.
So it's how do you leverage what others are doing and try to work together to make it better as a group.
Mike, I'm sure you guys probably take similar tactics from all the way from scouting combine to draft to
Yeah.
throughout, and then all the way into the Super Bowl.
I think it's funny. I mean, I think if your question were a movie title and it had a subheading, it could be colon, the magical world of compromise, or something. But and not in a bad way. But I think to follow on a lot of the stuff that Tom said, but also where we'll use the Super Bowl week as an example again. One of the things that we've been trying to be very cognizant of and keep reminding ourselves is make sure the money we're spending is ending up on the screen, and trying to be as smart as we can about that. But also within this expansive week, how do we, really finding the tent poles of the week and kind of back timing the dollars from there, knowing that our biggest audience comes on Sunday morning for our pregame show. Make sure that we're taking care of that, and then with the added, there's a added wrinkle this year. For those of you familiar with the Super Bowl week, media day used to be on a Tuesday, mid-morning, mid-afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. There's now an emphasis on trying to, again, create a more of an opening night feel, and that moves to a Monday night and try to a bigger production. So really looking at the whole week and trying to figure out where can we spend and have the most impact and back time everything from that. It's not to say that everything else is left to scraps between Sunday morning and the previous Monday night, but how do we make sure that we're putting the money where it counts the most and trying to draft off of that throughout the week?
Are you guys doing a full linear telecast that Monday night? Is that going to be a
We will be
big
doing
blowout?
yeah, we'll
prime
have
time?
a 3-hour telecast that will incorporate the traditional media day, now media night, but also being the 50th anniversary, there will be multiple MVPs involved, and again, trying to cop a. We continue to come back to with using like the Olympic moniker and model is okay. Try to get a little bit of that feel, and this is the first time we're doing it, so trying to figure out how to eventize, the other word that, that Tom mentioned, well, how do we eventize these things and create a little bit more buzz and, kind of kick the week off, as opposed to it's become so much more than just, obviously the game is the biggest thing, but it's so much around that, and how do we kick off the week in the city, show off the city, and also just kind of make people aware that, okay, Super Bowl week has begun.
David Fox eventizes as good as anybody in the business. So, I mean, how did you kind of deal with the budget, which I'm sure was large, but like Tom said, there's never enough in order to get the structure that you guys wanted?
It's interesting when you go from a multi-day event like NBA All-Star Weekend or a week-long event like Super Bowl week, and then you get to something that's multiple weeks, the Olympics, 17 days, and then World Cup, which is a full month. One of the challenges, which is also a benefit, is that it's imperative that you create a destination in the viewer's mind. If they're going to keep coming back to you with your cast and your location and your subject matter day after day and hopefully week after week, you can't just throw anything up there on the air. It's been done before, and I think that it hurts the shows. And one of the things that my boss, John Entz and Eric Shanks, both committed to at the outset was that what we were going to make as our home, and by extension the viewer's home for a month in Vancouver, that it had to be worthy of that it couldn't be something that would get old quickly, something where you only had a couple of shots and a cross shot and you're seeing the same thing all the time. So the money was there. Again, as Tom said, there's never enough, but it was sufficient to get us what we needed, to have 2 levels, so you had multiple looks and that sort of thing. Because really, one of the things that, whether it's the Olympics or the World Cup, by creating a destination in your viewers' minds, what you really want to see and hear anecdotally or with a focus group, what have you, is that on that Monday when the event's over, so on the Monday when the opening ceremony has come and gone and the whole thing happens, and then 17 days later, the closing ceremony happens. On Monday, you want to hear viewers saying they missed the Olympics.
Right.
And the same was true for the World Cup. We wanted people on the day after the final to have become such appointment television viewers that they felt a sense of loss, that they couldn't watch it. And I do think that having the right kind of environment for your studio shows only becomes magnified, the importance of it, when you have a multiple day, multiple week event.
Right, and it helps to kind of tell those stories, right? The idea if they have a home to access those stories, that they'll keep coming back.
Exactly right.
Joe, a similar question. I mean, budget, is a concern and everything, but I have an added question for you, and that's how the hell do you scale from a half a dozen person operation to a 270 person operation with 5 control rooms? It's got to be not exactly the most seamless thing. I mean, how do you kind of weather that storm?
It's an interesting challenge. No, we've grown into it. I mean, the amazing thing is that the size of the event we're doing now, it's really only about 4 years old. And I mean, our sport is brand new anyway. The way we approach it is brand new. In fact, we're still learning how to score a lot of our events. There's so many new things that we're dealing with, but we take them on as challenges. We try things. One of the interesting things for us in terms of dollars and cents is we're not kind of beholden to the same economic model as network sports. Basically, the CrossFit Games are self-funded. Although we have some sponsorship partners that help us throughout the season, the entire cost of running all of our productions is pretty much picked up by CrossFit Inc. So we have to be very careful with the dollars. And Tom kind of alluded to this earlier this morning, which I thought was great, which is sometimes you have to find ways to utilize technology, and not necessarily in ways that it was intended.
Right.
Good example of that for us was a few years ago. In order to cover our sport, we feel it's absolutely essential to have cameras on the field to play. You can't cover it very well without it. We don't have a ball to follow. We don't have a puck. We have 10 or 12 athletes on the field at the same time. You need to be in the right place to see the athletes who are surging ahead. To do that, we had to get cameras on the field to play. When we shot ENG, 2011, 2012, not a problem. 2013, the task had come to us to try and get live coverage. And so in order to do that, we had to find a wireless solution. Well, we have a lot of qualifying competitions that we call regionals. That year we were doing, I think, 17 of them. 14 of them we wanted to do live. We had to come up with a wireless camera that wasn't going to cost us $1,000 per day per camera. So we found a smaller solution, prosumer solution, you might say, that was actually intended to broadcast from a camera to an iPad so that a director could see live what the camera was shooting. We adapted that and rerouted the signal into our TriCasters, and all of a sudden, bingo, we have wireless cameras that we could afford and we could do all our coverage with. And those are the kind of things that we look for to try and find the right scaling that will help us accomplish the goal.
Very cool. So these events aren't just about the game itself and about the studio shows and everything, but they provide you guys with a great opportunity to kind of expose the other properties that might be in your wheelhouse and everything. So David and Mike, I'll kind of go to you on these two since you guys both have big, massive news operations. How do you go about integrating the broadcast center operation at home with the studio on site? How do you try to integrate it into the game? How do you try to just kind of take advantage of this opportunity to use your tools at home while also using these special eventized type studios on the road? And then another question is, are you guys using any kind of at-home, what we at SVG call at-home production, the idea of a centralized control room and just kind of backhauling cameras out there? I would think on-site studio shows make a lot of sense for these kind of workflows and stuff. So basically just how do you tie the operation at home with the operation in the field to make it seem like a seamless experience for the viewer?
I think, well, it's very great timing for that question, which we're living through a little bit right now. This will be the past, all of the Super Bowl coverage and weeks that I've been a part of with NFL Network. It's kind of a unique thing from any place else I've worked where we're still such a relatively staff-wise small operation, relatively speaking, where not to a body, but the whole operation essentially picks up and moves to the Super Bowl city. So all live programming in the past was coming from the Super Bowl city. This year, and will be the model moving forward, I believe, is we are, to your point, at home, we're running a lot of cameras home. And again, back to the how do you get creative with the budget. What we're doing is for the daytime hours of programming, essentially, if you think of it from basically 9 a.m. until really 6 p.m. Eastern, those productions will be getting produced, directed from our home base, with cameras being home run. And so we have kind of a hub where we hope to minimize the use. We don't want to be in studio if we don't have to be. We want to be getting out and about to the various places in San Francisco and beyond, and using smaller setups on site for that. And then really minimizing the length of day, the crew, the wear and tear on the truck, as opposed to doing everything out of 1 or 2 trucks during the day. And then really, again, isolating and prioritizing the on-site truck and on-site productions, true on-site productions happening in prime time and in those windows. And so we've had a couple of kind of toe-in-the-water experiments with the at-home and home running cameras back. Things like the Veterans Combine, which is something that was just recently created last year, where the entire event was run through a much smaller unit, but everything was done back in Culver City. When we do our training camp coverage, which is literally on the air at 6 a.m. Pacific and off until about 8 p.m. Pacific. We're just constantly live all day. The majority of that is all, there are some sites where we're fully covering practice with a game truck. There are other sites where we're using TV view units and out and about, but everything is coming back through the studio where it's funny. It's what we tell ourselves and our producers. What's the difference if you're on the front row of a truck and your graphics operator is in a different unit? If that different unit is 3,000 miles away, now we all know that there's obvious comforts of having the ability to knock on a wall or get out and go into a room, but we're all kind of getting our heads around that kind of production. So where we can save some dollars and again make sure that what we're spending ends up on the screen.
Right. Some getting your heads around it faster than others, I would think,
Yes.
when it comes to the production.
It's a mind
side.
bender. It can definitely be a mind bender.
Sure. David, when you were brought aboard for Super Bowl and World Cup, FS1 had just launched or was just about to launch.
Just
I mean,
about
that's
to,
an
yeah,
interesting
that's right.
dynamic there, tying again FS1 together with these huge events that could plug an up and coming property.
Yeah, and we were very aware of the fact that it was going to be a great opportunity to bring new viewers to FS1 and to have them sample not only what we were doing, but programming either leading into what we were doing or, very importantly, programming coming out of what we were doing. Fox Sports Live, just as ESPN, for years successfully leveraged the end of the World Cup to lead into the start of Sports Center. We did the same thing with FS Live, and as you can imagine, their viewership numbers were astronomically improved. So that is, it makes practical sense, but it certainly makes business sense as well that you want to try to cross-promote your other properties and give a new audience a chance to see something else that they might otherwise not have found. So, and on the other item that Mike was just talking about, we've sort of taken a hybrid approach to it. We left all of our editing on the lot here in Pico. We left all of our graphics operation on the lot. Again, exactly what ESPN had done from Brazil and frankly what NBC had done from Sochi.
Sure.
You can trust that. I think that for a 30-day event, I really wouldn't want to have our show talent, our studio talent, who are sometimes doing an hour or more between games. I don't want to have them by themselves in Russia and have their producer and their director and their writers and all that thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away back in the U.S., although it's technically feasible. So I think the playbacks, the edits, the graphics and all that, no problem leaving that in the U.S. But for a multi-week event like the World Cup, I think that there's still real value to having the core production team just on the other side of the wall, as Mike said.
There's still that benefit of the communication on site and the feel of
right.
being there during the event. Yeah. Joe, you guys do stuff from your home, I believe, right? You said you have your studio show is done from home a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a small studio on site at our headquarters that we use 4 or 5 times a week. Most of the stuff that we do there is time delayed. recorded and played back or posted on the CrossFit Games website. But we had an interesting experience last year. For the first time, we tried to do live studio inserts using a sort of a network pregame, halftime, and postgame model. During our regional competitions, we did a lot of stuff out of our studio. Now, you know, we're working on a different economic scale than the big boys. Right. So transmission is a big issue for us. To give you an example, our regional competitions, we do 3 days of competition, about 9 hours a day. So, you know, booking 27 hours of competition from 8 different locations is not an economic reality for us for fiber or satellite. So we found a solution to use the public internet and you know, try and get as much bandwidth as we could afford. And using some technologies, we use the Zixi broadcaster, which helps us with buffering and latency to assist us in that. Now, one of the hurdles that we had to come across was that obviously there are delays. So we couldn't really do live 2 ways with our studio, but this year we utilized a new text talk show, which uses Skype, and we were able to do a lot of live interviews with not only athletes around in different parts of the world, but we also went to some interesting locations. We even hooked up with the Cook Islands in the middle of the Pacific for an interview. And we got some very interesting people involved in our studio shows using a technology and a product that was scaled and, you know, cost effective for our purposes.
I mean, we're seeing more and more of that. Tom and Turner did the Ryder Cup over public internet, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Ish.
that was two years
2 years ago, yeah, a while ago. But Tom, same thing. Any of the at-home stuff, and how do you tie at home into your presence on site as we are running out of time shortly?
Well, it really depends on you know, the budget. Obviously,
Sure.
is a big play. The Ryder Cup, we just couldn't travel people, so we brought camera feeds into a small unit, sub-switched those onto 10 transmission paths back to Atlanta, and basically assembled the show in Atlanta. So that was purely a budget call on that. Transmission savings alone paid for all of the equipment. So
right.
That's the magnet. If you want a difference in scale, that's the difference of coming up with, learning how to work with the limitations of that technology, because as Joe said, there is delay. We had 6.5 seconds of delay from Scotland to Atlanta. But again, we figured out how to work with that. We conducted interviews that were rolled off the tape, and then we rolled them in. So the production team was very good in being flexible and understanding the limitations of the technology. So as long as you learn how to do that and you don't get caught up in the mechanics, just know, okay, I can't do this, move on. Everything worked great. At the end of the day, when you saw the show, you would not be able to tell if we had been on site or not.
Right.
It really, at the end of the day, looked as good as if we had everyone there in Scotland.
No live throws to the studio.
No live throws.
Right. I have one more kind of lightning round question for these guys, but if anybody has questions out there, I think we have a couple of mics. Raise your hand and try to grab one. There's one right up here if somebody could bring them a mic. But going right down the line, it's a question that we had a similar panel to this a couple years ago at this event, and I'm always fascinated because it's always a different answer from everybody. When you have an on-site studio at a major event like this, how do you choose the location? What are the primary factors that play into that? David mentioned a little bit of it in Vancouver, but obviously it's not your guys' decision on your own, but how do your teams go out and do site surveys and try to find a place that is going to be economical, but also exciting, and a place where you can probably set up some kind of truck or something like that along those lines? Mike,
well, I think David said earlier too. I think the jumping off point for all of us is what looks the prettiest, but also what is indigenous to the area you're in. You want to have, you know, what iconic landscapes are you showing? So that's a huge factor. And it really, just as you said, there's that factor, and then also what is feasible from a technical standpoint. Parking, how, is there office space adjacent? Do we have to build office space? All those factors go in, but really it starts with what is the right look that we're trying to convey, and what scenics can we show off, and then again, work a little bit backwards from there in terms of convenience or for technical efficiency.
David?
Yeah, it really is making a statement that every day your viewers are instantly going to know where they are, that they're watching you. You want it to be authentic to where you are. You want it to capture the vibe and the feel of the location of the event. And then I do think that secondarily, you want all the logistical options to be there for you. You don't want to be in such a remote place that you can't get it done, because then that kind of negates the value of
Joe, how's your guys' placement kind of evolved in terms of the studio out there?
Well, we're not as fortunate as some of the other sports in that we compete in 3 different venues. So for us, it's a little bit of a crapshoot trying to pick out the place that's going to be representative, give you a sense of feel of being at the event. I mean, that's really what our number one goal was this year, and I think we accomplished it well, was to give those people at home that couldn't make it to Carson, California, but were really big fans and wanted to feel involved in the event, give them a sense of being there.
Tom, how did you guys choose Hammerstein Ballroom for the NBA All-Star, the Pier for opening night? I mean, what goes into those decisions real quick?
Events group paid for it.
Samsung, thank you very much. Yeah.
No, but much like what David and Mike said, we're looking for that iconic backdrop. The Hammerstein, having a long history in New York, a notable ballroom from the 30s, I believe, when it was first built. So, again, just a historic place, and it just made sense.
Very cool. Just one quick question up front. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to hear you guys talk a little bit about the importance of virtual enhancements and what that future looks like for your broadcasts.
The question, if anybody couldn't hear it, it was about VR and not VR, virtual enhancements and augmented reality type stuff for studio shows and that kind of thing.
FIFA is very restrictive about what you can do with branding and marks that are non-FIFA sponsors. And our post-game show, World Cup Tonight, had enough legal separation in it that we were able to bring in a non-FIFA sponsor. So we made that Fiat 500X crossover look like it was everywhere in Vancouver, and in fact, it was nowhere in Vancouver. So it was essential to us keeping one of our biggest sponsors happy.
I think that the philosophy that I know that we take a lot to is emphasizing enhancements. And yes, we want to do things that look cool and are visually intriguing. Again, that sometimes the best sample audiences are, our younger children that go, or are used to watching sports on a video game and saying, why doesn't what you do look like that? But I think the enhancement is a key part of it. You don't want it to overtake the story you're telling or the event you're covering, but you want it to enhance it in that scope.
Tom, you guys, I mean, all kinds of
We use virtual enhancements for inside the NBA. We do all of our brand logos are virtual, and allows us a lot of flexibility because we can basically put it anywhere, and we don't have the physical restrictions of having to move it, light it. So it really provides a lot of flexibility.